Good afternoon. Today on World Mental Health Day, we in the Mind Diaries are in conversation with Dr. Rajiv Agarwal. Dr. Agarwal is a psychologist, lawyer, software architect, linguaphile, amateur farmer, armchair philosopher, and an entrepreneur. That's a long introduction. uh, Dr. Agarwal started his first venture when he was all of 19. He's the co-founder for technology, mental health, and agro biodiversity venture. He has funded over a dozen startups in the social enterprise and technology space. He considers himself the primary test subject of his own experimental hypothesis of life and seems to enjoy that journey. This year's mental health day theme is mental health is a universal human right, which serves as a reminder to everyone on the planet to raise awareness, advance in understanding, and encourage action that will protect and advance everyone's right to mental health. Dr. Agarwal, we now share lots of questions with you, hear lots of anecdotes.
Yeah. So I think I don't know I will be able to answer them, but basically I can walk through them here and there, right? So that I'm used to. As an entrepreneur, the idea is to weave stories, right? They may not be true, but that I can do.
That's exactly what we want, actually. And I want to just take forward what she just said about the theme of this year's World Mental Health Day, which is exactly what the Mind Diaries is doing, trying to do, create awareness about mental health and also get more and more people to talk about their issues so that they can seek therapy. Just to start with therapy, how important is it to seek therapy and also to seek therapy even if you feel you don't have a problem?
I think it is. So when I think Prachi was introducing that line, I consider myself the first test subject myself. Seeking therapy does not mean that you have to go to somebody. Are you seeking for yourself? Are you seeking that question for yourself? I think that's the when you seek it for yourself, you can seek it in any which way. You can talk to the people, you can go to certain profession. The idea is in seek. Are you seeking? I think that is where it starts.
What about the stigma that is attached to it? Anything to do with mental health?
There's a large one. And from my experience, what I've seen is the people who are more aware of it and rather who consider themselves who have more richer kind of a mental life also. Sometimes I see that stigma is more than they find it harder to seek. But somewhere it seems like I'm not, it's like accepting defeat that I'm taking somebody else. So it's more like this resistance from taking it. From my standpoint, it takes courage to see it. To leave control also takes a lot of courage. It's not easy to leave. It takes you your own personal courage. And I think that also is a process, a journey, which a person has to think for themselves. Whether they like to. Why are they not seeking it? Is it because they're afraid of it, right? Or is it something else? If it is you're fearful of it, because it tells you that you're not good enough, then maybe that is something you would like to check.
So, if I may add, are you trying to say we actually have to be strong to seek therapy? Because mostly we believe if I am weak, only then will I seek therapy. But today we are learning that we have to be strong to seek therapy.
Let me give you an anecdote. Right? You might have seen people rattling down the mountain, right?
Right.
Which is the most difficult part, right? When you basically leave the footprint. Why it is most difficult? Because you will see people will go the road like this at that stage. Why? Because they are afraid of losing them. It takes courage to let them go. And that is where we need that strength.
That's beautiful. Actually. But the one thing that I also want to ask is this strong and weak thing that we keep talking about. When we say strong and weak to seek therapy, I I have been told by my doctor that I should seek therapy because I am doing uh, work which requires me to understand what therapy means. But I feel that मेरे को अभी तो जरूरत ही नहीं है, तो मैं क्यों जाऊँ therapy में?
Interesting point, right? So you are doing this work to publish mind, right? Which is all about mental health. And don't you think rather it becomes more necessary for you to understand how the process works when you do work? And how would you know something? Let's say you are into the business of tasting mango, selling it. Can you really describe mango unless you have tasted various mangoes? No. I think rather you should go to various therapists to understand how the process works.
What about somebody who's never opened up about anything to do with that person's life? Never opened up, not even to the closest family member. And then to suddenly tell that person that you need to seek therapy to understand what therapy means.
See, let me put it like this. Typically, what happens is when we push somebody to go for it, they will resist. The point is, in that stage, you rather have to ask them what is that they are doing for them, what all they have explored for that. It is about basically igniting that human agency in them. So when they will ignite that, that resistance will. Right? Because if somebody tells them, it is like pointing that you are not in the right shoe. Rather, when you basically facilitate, it is whatever they are in that current state in life, is that helping them progress? Or they are finding themselves stuck somewhere. And they are stuck somewhere, what it be good for them to figure out which move and what next time. Facilitate them, then answer they will come. It's also said that if you want to share, you don't want to share your experiences with somebody who's a total stranger to you, you sit down and write a diary, or you talk to, a friend who's non-judgmental, who does not sit on a high horse telling you what you're doing wrong or what somebody else is doing. Does that help? Yes, all of that is helpful. So when you write also, that's also a way to reflect what's going on in your mind. So when you write, you see what's going in your mind and you get more clarity. Same way, it is not about the friend that you're telling. So when you tell something, don't you think that is also an experience? Because then when you tell, it is you also who's hearing. You are the first listener of what you're saying. Are you able to listen to yourself? Right. So a lot of times when you tell your friend, the point is, are you being your own listener? Because sometimes it is so difficult to listen to yourself. So that friend there allows you to become yourself the first listener of yourself. Noting that itself is a big thing. That's a very interesting point which has never been raised by anybody. I wonder how many people actually listen to themselves when they talk about their own issues, even if they're telling somebody who's a friend, not a therapist. The one thing that I want to also ask you is somebody I know who's under medication also goes to a counselor, but says कि therapist के पास किसलिए जाना है? वो तो सिर्फ सिर्फ बैठे रहते हैं, सुनते रहते हैं, कुछ आगे तो बोलते नहीं, दवाई तो कोई और देता है, और मैं उनको पैसे दे के आ जाता हूँ, वो तो इनको बताते हैं कि मुझे क्या करना है। मुझे भी एक क्वेश्चन है इसमें, थेरेपी में होता क्या है? इट्स अ क्वेश्चन आई हियर फ्रॉम अ लॉट ऑफ पीपल। इट्स लाइक आप अंदर जाते हैं, दरवाजे के अंदर क्या हो रहा है किसी को नहीं पता। आई हैव हर्ड इट फ्रॉम सो मेनी पीपल। होता क्या है थेरेपी में? सो कैन यू टेल अस व्हाट दैट बिग सीक्रेट इज? बिकॉज़ बहुत लोग डरते हैं थेरेपी के लिए जाने। तो अब आप मुझे अगेन आम का डिफाइन करने की बात कर रहे हैं। अब आम का टेस्ट कैसा होता है? मैं तो गई हूँ, बट मैं तो बता रहा हूँ आपको कि आम का टेस्ट डिफाइन करेंगे, जो भी डिफाइन करेंगे वो कभी भी पूरा झूठ नहीं होगा, पूरा सच नहीं होगा, ठीक है ना? वैसे ही ये भी चीज है। अगर मैं थेरेपी में बोलूँ तो मेरे जो जिस एंगल से मैं लेमन टर्म में डिफाइन करता हूँ, तो पहला चीज होता है आपको एक स्पेस होती है वेंटिलेट। आप अपने अंदर का जो स्टीम होता है, इमोशनल स्टीम होता है, उसे आप निकालो। जो भी हम बात कर रहे हैं, जब वो स्टीम निकलता है तो शायद आप उसे सुन पाते हैं। हो सकता नहीं भी सुन पाए क्योंकि पहले इतनी तेजी से निकलता है कि आप नहीं सुन लेता। मगर जब निकलना थोड़ा धीरे होता है तो आप भी सुन पाओ। एक तो पार्टी होता है, चाहे थेरेपिस्ट कुछ करे या ना करे। दूसरा पार्ट जो आ जाता है आपको अपने इमोशन का कुछ वैलिडेशन देता हूँ, क्योंकि आप बोल रहे हो उसमें भी कुछ सत्य है, सच है। तो ये दो प्रोसेस में, और शुरू में जब व्यक्ति आता है उसके अंदर बहुत सारा इमोशनल स्किल जो उन्होंने अपना बहुत सारा दबा के वो समझ, आई थिंक दैट इज वन थिंग and that is also needed at that stage. Then, then there is a third part, which is the part of intervention, which is basically moving that person from becoming that special, where they are able to go deeper into their own recesses to understand, which is which is more tricky, harder, and a lot of times in therapy that part never gets done. Because a lot of times, even the person who comes for therapy, not even ready. They're only ready for the first one. And that is why you find in a lot of therapy sessions, the movement does not happen. It gets stuck in this time. That is also. I don't know how much of that answers.
It does, I'm sure for a lot of our readers and listeners, because ये question बहुत often आता है कि therapy में होता क्या है? So I guess it's important to answer that question.
So what it also answers this question ना कि मैं तो वहाँ जाके बैठता हूँ बोलता हूँ कुछ बोलते नहीं। So this is
तो थेरेपिस्ट बोलता नहीं, बेसिकली थेरेपिस्ट का प्राइमरी काम डायरेक्ट करना तो होता ही नहीं। थेरेपिस्ट का प्राइमरी काम होता है, is the therapist able to create that space for you so that you can basically let that what is being done. And then is that therapist able to take you a space where you become the listener of what? Basically, the whole part is if the therapist has to give direction, I think then it's not moving in the right. But is the therapist able to engage you? It does not mean the therapist is like a dead. Are they touching you at the right? The point is, are they touching? They are. That's what it is.
Also, how does somebody know they have to go for therapy? मतलब क्या थेरेपी एक रेगुलर जैसे हम अपना हेल्थ एनुअल चेकअप करते हैं पूरा बॉडी का, क्या हमको मेंटल हेल्थ की तरफ भी ऐसे ही करना चाहिए? Or should we go when we have a problem? What should be the norm?
added to this question. Is there anything like readiness for therapy? Because I think it takes a lot of trust to open up. I don't know if the person needs to have that or that is something which is mutually created or the onus is more on the therapist. So I just want to understand if there is something like
That's an interesting question, as in readiness for therapy. I don't think there is a single point that you could define that this is a readiness, like learning swimming, maybe jumping from a diving board. So there may be some desire inside that you feel. Right? And it is very normal, let's say, when you go to that diving board by basically falling, not taking it. That does happen. But then the movement only comes when you dive. So the first dive, I think, has to come from the client. But once you have taken that dive, I think then the onus does shift to the because then it is like swimming together. Or rather, at times, it is more like it is therapy's kind of job to figure out, help you have fun in that swimming. Fun does not mean that you laugh. I'm talking of a fun of a deeper level, which is curious, which is more interesting. So you basically look at how you're swimming there. Life is no different from a swimming. If you stop it, it doesn't flow. It's no longer.
I think can there be several goals for therapy? Like when I think of therapy, I mean my supreme goal is to enhance self-awareness. And I think a lot of stigma also comes with when a person sets another goals. Like when especially people in their ecosystem tells them, why don't you seek therapy? Or why don't you try therapy? Because you're struggling with this, or because we've seen you doing this. So how can how can we actually motivate people around us who are cynical about this process?
So one is, I think one big motivation comes from people sharing their own journey. When somebody is able to put that journey upfront, I think that's a big thing. It becomes something which you can discuss and which is not really artificial. So in some places, it could become like a fact that I have a therapist. That's not really very useful. But a journey which really made sense. And specifically the points like you talked about earlier, what happens in the therapy session. They're able to point out what was done. There'll be few points that might have moved this person. And it may not be even your therapist might have gone. Things that came from you only, and maybe you noticed. And that. So I think sharing that would be a great way for other people to figure out. And I think your question I didn't answer. Basically, unlike the physical health where you can do, let's say, a monitoring and you can have a very objective data coming out, uh, that's kind of difficult from a therapy standpoint. I would look at the therapy as a space to hear more, but you need to have the right kind of therapist also.
Yeah.
But that's very essential. There could be n number of free, but they themselves do not have that deeper level of understanding. So it's not a space where you are going to fix yourself. You may come when there may be a problem. Yes, that's one thing. But I think the therapy is to bring that awareness that I want to stop. It basically makes you aware of it. That's pretty much what I see as a larger goal.
To take forward the question that she just asked, in your experience as a psychologist, how many people come in voluntarily?
Most of them, almost all come voluntarily. Uh, at max, maybe 3%, 4% would come was somebody brought it. And that mostly does not really work. Because when they come with that mindset, they are coming with resistance already. And when somebody is coming with a resistance, it's very difficult to break. That rapport itself does not help. So it's difficult, very difficult to break that. Sometimes it does break because what happens is most of the scenarios I've seen with kids. So they may be brought by parents or things, or at times I've seen the other way around. Old parents being pushed by their kids, right? Uh, to come and then the other segment that I find is people on very high positions, right? Again, who have been somehow pushed to come. So these are challenging places, right? Uh, to tackle. But some of them do turn up, right? And that would also require patience. Because finally, when they come for their own world. Then,
When you just said people from high places, most of the time we come back to the stigma part of it. Most of the time people don't actually seek therapy or talk about it because they feel professionally would hamper their lives. So how do you deal with that? How do you help them tackle that?
yeah, I hear you. That's a big problem. Like I would have clients like that, and in the right kind of places, right? But the point is they can't talk even in their own places. Because your model, so they themselves understand it makes sense, but they cannot talk this open. And that is why I was pointing to this point that if people can put their testimonies there clear, it changes. Because currently these guys, even if they know uh, that their colleague is facing, they cannot go and tell that person. But this kind of made sense and why it makes sense. Because there's a significant amount of trauma.
So what would you then think of a magazine like the Mind Diary, which is actually encouraging people to talk to you? See, there's a space for it. I mean, we personally thought, but what do you see as a therapist?
See, I really have. There is a space for people to really talk their own things and rather go deeper.
Ji.
Know exactly what worked. Because I think that really clarifies what really happened and just instead of just saying that I went to a therapist, right? That's too abstract, doesn't really do, right? So the point is, what exactly in that therapy session works,
जी.
right? If that kind of a nuance comes out, it does. But other
So बोल रहे हैं कि, उसका journey बतानी है so that others can be guided.
yeah, they could see relation,
जी.
right?
जी.
They could see relation to it. Like for example, a lot of it is what happens is you see patterns, happen, right?
Right.
And the patterns are repeated. The thing is, I look at us, all of us, like automatic. Mostly, we operate automatically. Like I'm speaking, right? I really have no clue what my next word is going to be. You hear the same like I, right? So consciously looking at this and retraining takes effort. So the point is, in that session, what kind of pattern? What was something interesting for you? And then what? I think that kind of a thing makes sense. But the big problem that I find in things like this is one, the ability to bring that nuance. And the other thing is people factually ending up reading and relating. That's the bigger problem that I see, right? But yeah, if that could be somehow addressed, it does make sense.
Right.
So, and then there is no silver bullet solution. So there are people who might read a print media. There are people who go on a digital platform thing.
Yeah.
So I think everything has its own space. For me saying you should not have a print or a print, I don't think makes sense because I'll give a very different example from a certain friends of mine. These guys come from Hindi literature. So they've been working, but they are amateur writers. They used to write for places like Dinman and Dharmyug and whatever, right? And they wanted to start again a print kind of a magazine for Hindi because there is a certain set of people who still read prints. Right? That is also a segment.
जी.
Or a print, the advantage is like it is lying, I'm sitting, and maybe it is there. Why pick it? That's another thing.
So, so Rajiv, is it fair to tell the people you love, the people you care about, to seek therapy, or that is not the place we should be in?
See, the point is, I would rather question is why are you telling me? What is there?
Right.
Right? It may be whenever we advise somebody, what is that I'm taking? If I see somebody is stuck, and I see maybe this thing is useful, I think the first part would be to open them to that stage where they are seeking advice.
Right.
Because if it is an unsolicited advice, it is useless. It will only create a mistake. If they are at the stage where they are seeking it, then that's fine. Right? But if that's not the stage, it is more like pushing them. It won't.
How do you bring someone to the place of seeking, especially when someone is suffering, when they are so much absorbed with their pain or their misery or or whatever they are going through? How do you bring them to that place?
So what I'm hearing is somebody is absorbed in their own misery. So they have put walls. So if you throw any advice on them, do you really think that advice will go inside? Only thing you have to find some small space in that wall that you can open, that you are into their part of it. Stay here. And when they are into that flow, at that stage, when you will have you actually at that stage you become their therapist in some way. And maybe you will help them and they will get that flavor of it. And you will say, have been able to walk this stage, and they will have an evidence of that walk that can go. Then you ask them that you could have other people walk with. Fine. Might be very good.
Another question that I have in mind, which has just come up, is that being, it's not as a mental health issues, it's been going, it's been there for years. But in the last few years, everybody is talking about mental health. You turn whichever way you want, everyone is talking about mental health. Why has it suddenly become so important for people to look into it? I think to add to that, there's also becomes cool to talk about or to own or to like throw casual references. You know, my therapist said that. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think both things are right. So one, she's saying it is cool that I go to therapist. So that's a different thing. Uh, but factually, that is not something which is a deeper. The other part that you were talking about has become more, let's say, specifically in country like ours, is a couple of things which has happened. Right? So earlier it was more of a more collective kind of a society. People couldn't even think of themselves as individuals separate. They didn't have their own separate identity. They couldn't figure out, right, their own agency person. So they never thought in that end. That was one part. The other part is there was a social fabric which supported people when they were stuck. Right? That fabric is also pretty much going off, was not there. So these two things together have played a huge role in sudden this upward movement of mental health. Humans are primarily psychological animals. And when that psychological part is not well functioning, will have an issue. Basically does not allow that human animal to live their life fulfilling. And I think when this fabric and this part which has changed is coming up, it will be more prominent to this. But then there will be the other part also. There is human scenario, emotions of showing one up. I will tell this one, like I went out. Like,
But I think that's all for the movement. Even if that is happening, the initial stage, you know, even if people thinking it's cool to access that space or you have someone to confide in, I think it's all for the movement. It's fine if that happens.
see, that's fine. I don't see it. See that it also helps in a way if it becomes like I have a therapist, right? Perfectly okay. But my point is there are pros and cons to everything, right? It makes it accessible, reduces stigma to some level, right? But then it can also make it fluff, right? And then it basically takes away the deeper meaning of what it is, right? It just becomes what has become of yoga, right? Yoga has become a physical exercise. It is no longer basically yoga of connection to yourself. If you look at Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, physical exercise which comes into Hatha Yoga was small part, right? Basically it starts with Chitta Vritti Nirodha, Iti Yoga. Chit ki vritti ka nirodha is yoga. What is that? So too much of fluff basically takes it. That's what I'm saying. So fluff is useful, everything could be useful. But till a person is able to go deeper into things.
I think I also that also reminded me of something. I was talking to a friend the other day, and he happened to mention that seeking therapy now has started to feel like dating, like because of the fitment issues with the therapist. So every time he accesses the space or is reaching out to someone, it feels like now I have to tell everything about my life. And it is just not happening. Like that space isn't getting created. So he said that he feels really exhausted. So how do we deal with the issues of fitment?
It's a really interesting example, but yes, I would also, I mean,
Because a lot of people's initial experience defines how and what they think about him.
You find a date and you don't find that date fitting. Will you just stick to that date just because it is difficult to find the right thing? Or will you like to and maybe before you go to the date, you will also have certain ways of figuring out whether the chances are more or less. Say something similar.
Right.
Put anything different. So Point is, you're going for yourself. Don't you think you owe that to yourself to figure out when you do? It's not, I would rather look at it, are you promoted? Not. Of course. That's an effort, I think, you owe to yourself. Find the right person for you.
So how does therapy help a regular individual?
How is a regular individual different from any people? They're also as vibrant as anybody. And I think the therapy comes into place when you maybe want to move to that inner power of your own to understand it. Maybe at some stage you would want to be maybe a regular and non-regular, also maybe that unique person. When you can feel it. You like to think and understand why do you think in a certain. When you say that I like something, what does it really mean? And when you say I don't like something, what does it really mean? Then that's a kind of function you might like. That child. Big place. Even a larger place when you want to look at things like purpose of your life. That could be also a question.
पूरी जिंदगी निकल जाती है इस कहते हुए कि स्ट्रेस है एंजाइटी है फलाना है मतलब पर फोकस नहीं होता कि भाई ये प्रॉब्लम हो सकती है because stress anxiety depression such loosely and such commonly used words which really doesn't people don't focus on that and think कुछ और भी हो सकता है.
Sure. Because these things could emanate from any. And we are so used to stress, sometimes our system kind of just doesn't even know. There could be an everyday stress which may be happening. And we are so used to it, we don't bother about it. And it only depletes it. And we only look at it when I think our resilience is more or less tanked. From my standpoint, it is always good to look at, even when it is not tanked. Don't you think when you have resilience, might be a good time to really look at it? Then when you have tanked.
So then we come back to the same question. Should we seek therapy regularly, even if, there is no problem? You'd say it is like a health checkup that should have to check where every individual is. When is that a good thing?
Okay, let me take it right. It's not a check, it is programs. Right? So, and I'm not saying therapist means only go to a professional or a licensed. Don't you think it is essential, or rather, should any person pose to themselves to continuously seek progress inside?
Absolutely.
Right? They need to find various ways to build that progress inside themselves.
It's a self-growth story.
Exactly. So they understand themselves, and going to a professional therapist is also one of that ways. Right? Why should they do it only once a year? Should they not do it like the things like they eat food?
Yeah.
I would eat good food. We at these various stores find more. That's how I would look at it. Rather, the question that you're saying, when they are feeling well with themselves, I think that would be the best time to do it.
Wonderful.
Because you will have all the energy to be curious. When you're stuck, don't you think you will not have that energy to be? Right? Like she was saying, finding the right date. Don't you think when you're healthy, you will have all the energy and your cognitive functions running? Figure out what's the right one. Right? When you're down, you will not have that energy. I would rather recommend that's the time you should.
To conclude our conversation, when we see therapy for, I will not use the word cure because we seek therapy to help ourselves. So once we start feeling a little better, what do? We continue to seek therapy to continue that process of feeling better.
I think I will link it to my last answer. Once you are off whatever that time spot you were in, then you owe to yourself to basically go deeper into your own function so that you can thrive in your life. Instead of just looking at life, okay, I'm over this pothole, like, rather look at life. And you look at the right kind of tools that you can do. It could be a therapist, it could be other groups, maybe things that they kind of circle you talk to. Or
Very simple examples you can give for people who, I mean, apart from seeking a therapist or a psychologist, seeking help professionally, very simple tools that you can think of that can really people see and work on. But stress है क्या कर सकते हैं? Relax.
well, there are small things, there are many, like there are many breathing exercises where like exercises of the kind that you will see. Uh, let's say you take a breath, count to 5 on the floor, and you will get basically signals your parasympathetic. So basically, it's those kind of things. But again, it may not work for all because it could be boring for certain people. Sit in. For some people, it may be they might like to go for a walk, or there could be certain set of people it could be in if you have a free right kind of thing. That would be also very therapeutic. And from my standpoint, uh, professional therapist is one part of it, but it's a very small thing, maybe once in a week for an hour. I think all these other things are just as necessary, maybe more. One working on themselves, one having those kind of spaces where one can do this all is there. At times, I would also suggest people when everything is going fine, disrupt, knowingly disrupt, right? So that you know when you disrupt, why is it creating? Give you an example. Small things, very small things which bind us. For example, I go for a walk. I typically would walk for an hour. And when I see sometimes that, okay, my hour is still 3 minutes happen, right? And then I'm thinking, okay, let me finish the thing. I will not. The point is, why is it should be my conscious decision, my trained system, why is it saying you have to do for 3 minutes? Right? And same way, sometimes I would feel, yeah, chalte, then I will do 3 minutes more, I can pass them. So the point is, what I'm training myself is I can do either. And my trained system should not come and tell me, no, no, you're not done wrong. Okay? I should have the right to do right or over. It is my agency where I've trained my habit. My habit should not be controlling me and telling me. So I would rather recommend it and see when things are going fine, you disrupt. Just for the heck of disrupting and seeing. It could be small stuff, fresh like this in the day, food like this. Just
So you're also saying if somebody follows a time schedule, सुबह से इतने बजे खाना, इतने बजे walk, इतने बजे yoga, इतने बजे music, तो वो थोड़ा सा variation is yes.
what I'm saying is there is nothing bad in building habit, but you have to be careful. Do you own the habit, or the habit is owning you? And the only way you can check is to disrupt it, knowing. And then later on, are you feeling that continuous knock in your head? Raj, kuch hua nahi. Right? So maybe you wear your watch in a certain way, just shift it to the other way, right? And the way you check it is, am I getting that reminder? And let me give you a very simple example of something that is there, right? So for me, the way I look at the idea of God and spirituality is different, right? For me, putting a murti is not something which makes a lot of sense, right? So I had an old car and then a new one had come. So this driver of my wife's car, he brought that thing which was in that new car, right? And he brought to me, कि वो उसमें लगा दे. So I asked him, क्यों लगाना? Then I thought कि अगर मुझे फर्क नहीं पड़ता, so this Murti weighs maybe couple of grams, right? It won't change the average of the vehicle. It is not obstructing my view when I drive. So why I am telling him क्यों लगा? क्यों लग नहीं सकता? I would rather say लगा दो. And then I have to see my hypothesis, my experiment on myself is Am I even getting a thought? If I'm not, it is the legal way to know.
It's a very interesting way to put it. I think we've had a very interesting conversation. Thank you so much for giving us this time. It's been wonderful.
Same with me. Thanks for all your time.